Hi, my name is Stevie. Welcome to this new OOcast experience. And today's topic is about healing within as emergent wealth generator. So we'll have a conversation about this particular topic. If this topic raises some eyebrows, just be patient and go along with the flow. I think we're going to all learn something together. I'm not a specialist in this particular field. I will act as the temporary host of this OOcast experience, and I have Hugo with me, who will be the facilitator or the co-host of this interaction.
Hi, TV. How are you? Well, great to meet you again, and thanks for the invitation to this OOcast experience. I feel great and really open to explore this topic, which is very interesting, and it goes deep into what we are. And on my side, I invited Hannah. And Hannah, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you. And yeah, ironically, this is a topic that's actually very dear to my heart. I'm Hannah Apricot Eckberg. I'm calling in today from OOcast territory of Northern California in Humboldt County. I'm in the land of the giant redwoods. And growing up very close to nature, as I did in Southern California, I really at a young age recognized the importance of nature on our own well-being. And as a young girl, I also saw a lot of environmental damage to the land I was living on, as a very deadly pipeline was put through where I lived, and they closed down my school to put the processing facility. And a lot of this created deep stress as a young girl that dug into my heart and affected my health. And I think this is part of what led me to very early wanting to be a massage therapist and a healer, and to do all that I could to help others have their own well-being so that they could help the planet. And now, as part of my environmental work through the Abundant Earth Foundation, which I helped start, we also talk about personal resilience for planetary resilience. And so I'm really looking forward to exploring this topic with you all of how do we better take care of ourselves so that then we can have this form of wealth to share of our own well-being that then can radiate out, and that we can be better stewards for the planet if we're healthier in our own way. So yeah, that's just a brief introduction, and excited to dive deeper.
Hugo, do we have any experiences or sensitivities to start with? I guess the way Anna put it was that in her past she had some difficult times that made her focus on what on within, right, and on healing. It's nice to see her path. Are you starting from a point like that, or have you gone through some experience that has changed you?
In my personal experiences, I come from a family of healers. My grandma taught me the possibilities of healing with energies since I was very little. So I had this strong experience that suddenly became not normal when I was in the school. So I needed to keep quiet on what is to heal someone else and how does it feel to heal someone else, and being able to share your energy with others so they can feel better, or someone else healing you. And so I think that taught me a lot about the interconnectedness of all living beings. And of course I grew up in nature and in the desert, and I saw that most of the work that my parents were doing on the ground, on the social innovation ground, was about also healing. And right now I feel that this topic is completely relevant because it is about regeneration. And what is regeneration if it's not healing? So when we thought about sustainability before, it was about trying to stay break even somehow. So like the right point, but healing is important because in regeneration it is really about what we have damaged. So my experience about traveling the world is, and about living in nature, is that as a species we've been kind of killing our own habitat, and that we need to heal. And for healing the planet, we need to heal personally, and from healing personally, we need to be okay in the place that we live as well. We need to live in thriving ecosystems. So I think it's all very related in what Hannah was saying about planetary personal resilience, well-being, nature, environment, and regeneration.
So there is this idea here that the healing within is connected to some wealth potential, right? Some healing within is a process that is generative, right? Some wealth could emerge from that process. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it all depends on how you define wealth.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways, and I know you explore this in your conversations here, and it's like, yeah, we're not specifically talking money necessarily, but unless you are in good health, you're not able to be contributing to society very much. I mean, we here in the United States have so many chronic health issues that are mostly tied to our poor diet, our lack of exercise, our lack of nature, all of these things that then lead to people missing so much work, having to go on disability, not able to then be contributing out. But on the other side of the coin, if you are healthy and you are, just even radiating out that energy, even that can be like a form of wealth, to just make other people feel good because you're feeling good. And then you're able to contribute and live your piece of this puzzle so much more, of really living your gifts if you're healthy enough to. And I mean, it really doesn't matter how much money you have if you don't have your health. I mean, Steve Jobs is a great example of that. All the money in the world, and cancer got him at a young age, and so really, to me, health is our greatest wealth.
Yeah, I could also relate to that, going with the flow now, because like I said before we started this meeting, I'm a guy that focuses more what happens in between people, at more a relational type of work that I do, rather than within people, right? But I can relate with something here. I did have some healing to do. I was born in Romania, communist Romania, and I was 14 years old when the regime collapsed. And I witnessed this rapid, sudden shift from a state of fear towards a state of euphoria, where people's lives didn't matter anymore. They were out on the street and be ready to get shot, essentially, for an ideal of freedom. And that's for a 14-year-old adolescent is pretty shocking. were never prepared for these kind of situations, right? And there was violence. There was people killed, shot in the streets. And I was in the street. We made the choice with my sister and cousins to run away and go where the action is. And even today, I go towards the gunshot and not run away from it. That's part of my making. But coming out of that trauma, let's say, there was a process. Most of it subconscious. Got to Canada, got in school. Went through the school system. You're lining up for whatever society tells you to do, and at some point for me it was enough. So I was definitely disillusioned with socialism and capitalism. Coming to Canada, thinking that capitalism is something that we all want, and then the honeymoon ended after a few years, and then I guess what I started to do with Sensorica and getting interested in new ways of working, in new ways of in new economic models, I think was part of the healing. So that healing process within turned into a creative process where I, instead of just becoming radicalized or becoming totally detached from the world because you're a nihilist, becoming nihilist, I started to find ways out of it, right? And that was my creative process. That was my, and I see the wealth a part of that, which means if we all together find ways to collaborate and produce stuff in a different way, well, that's a wealth. That's institutional wealth. That's a new way of organizing work in society, reorganizing innovation and production and distribution in society. I think that's a sort of a wealth that doesn't belong to one individual, but it's something that belongs to the. So I do associate with that, and maybe from here we could explore, these different dimensions, right? So we spoke about the environment. Somebody can have a difficult situation in the past, and then the healing process within, because we have been traumatized by some shocking events. Maybe it's a hurricane, whatever. Then the healing, maybe the wealth is more connected to like regenerative environmental processes. In my case, was social related, right? And the wealth is in that domain. I heard Hugo speaking about his own experiences in the past, living in different places and stuff. So maybe there's a sort of a dislocation kind of pain and the healing process that he has gone through. So what are other dimensions that we can think of? Or
for me, some of these dimensions, they become like intergenerational in the way that, for example, to me, when I came to Belgium, I started dreaming about a panther and about a Araujo, so a red parrot. And I was in Belgium. I was coming from nature, where I swear that I was just with my kids and all this kind of daddy stuff. And then one shaman told me that I was going to be called from the Amazons. And 2 months after, I was called to make a biomimicry conference in the Amazon. And then being there, to make the story a little bit shorter, I met the panther shaman, or the panther wise guy, and the Araujo. The Araujo, it's an old guy, like now he had been just killed a few months ago by someone. But when I went to his maloca, so his place where he receives you, his house, his spiritual house, I realized that I had this trauma that it came from like previous lives, if I can say it like this, or in my dreams, if we want to stay in a more present description, where I saw all my community that had been burned, like alive, and I escaped in my dreams by being one of these panthers. So this panther pursued me for many months until I got there. And my question, and that was the moment that I feel that I was also being healed. My question to him was, are you ready to forgive? Because I think this is a big step for healing. And if you, as an indigenous people, you still want to kill the white people, then we are not healing anyone and we are not going anywhere. So this is not just something that the white people or the Western people, as I consider myself, it's about also the locals to be ready to accept what happened before and to heal the wounds. So I think this is also related to another guy that came to me from Brazil that told me that every time that we have positive connections, we depollute the planetary arteries of our planet. But that comes to the explanation that with wars and with all these negative impacts, we also create a collective memory in humanity that is actually very polluted. So emotional shocks, whether positive like love or negative like violence and fear, they have its own footprint in our collective consciousness. And I think this is something that we need to work from within, because what you're saying, it's about wars. What we have been living now is also a trauma that doesn't belong to us in this life. So for example, when I live close to Waterloo, and the first time that I went to Waterloo, the battlefield of Napoleon, man, the energy there was so terrific. And I can relate to what you say from wars. But how can we create these positive emotions in humanity that actually can overcome or make a new layer of positive information into our collective memory? And this is where I stand. Like most of my thinking and my intentions is how to bring hope and how to create more loving relationships. Of course, I grew up in Mexico City, so I also needed to survive, and I also fought for my rights and for my space, and I know violence from very close, but isn't it that an option? Like sometimes, or can we just make it an option every time that we have to decide? And how can we be conscious of doing and taking these kind of decisions?
There's something else that some idea that was generated in my mind when you were speaking about these conflicts between indigenous people and colonizers, and this is very actual, right? The whole idea here is that healing within could be a very individual process, like I gone through. Like Hannah seemed to also have gone through, but sometimes it becomes a collective kind of movement. How is that related to the emergence of new wealth? Sometimes it can be quite destructive, right? I mean, it can go both ways. It can be highly constructive. How these forces can sum up together to change the status quo and build something new, which will generate more prosperity for the future. But sometimes it's quite destructive, right? It's divisive. I mean, there's a lot of suffering around. There's a lot of collateral damage. Let's say that some segment of a population go through a group healing, let's say, but there's also a lot of collateral damage in the path. Well, I don't want to sink myself into these highly sensitive issues today, but how do you see this individual and this collective kind of healing, or is that healing at all? What we see, the collective, people getting together.
That's kind of a lot to unpack there. But even just at the beginning of what you were saying there, what it going back to more the personal well-being first before we radiate out, it makes me think also the concern and the quest for wealth and for financial stability is such a major stressor for so many people that it leads to so many health issues. And I know I've experienced that in my life. I've always focused more on my purpose than on my paycheck. And so I live with very little means, and quite often it's very stressful not to have enough to pay my bills. And so I really know what a lot of people go through in that sense, and with so much emphasis on money and wealth and in the world, rather than our basic needs being taken care of. And if wealth was more evenly distributed, if people weren't having to work so hard just to get their next meal, if they knew that was taken care of, the health and well-being would be so much better. And then that really radiates out to the health and well-being of society in general. And I really see, I see life as just all these fractals. And so, as we start with the self and healing the self, and that we're just really a mirror for the planet and even at the universe. And so I think that our personal well-being is also very tied to Gaia's well-being, if you will, or the well-being of the planet. And unpacking societal trauma is such a big one, and really ties in to the environment and to when people started feeling separated from nature, and that they were apart from it rather than a part of it, and that nature was there to conquer, and that we had to then enslave other humans in order to go cut down the rainforest so that we could have monocrops, so that rich men in Europe were making money off of slave labor in South America. I'm using that example because that comes from the very early days with Alexander von Humboldt, who Hugo and I both really study and appreciate his work. And in the early 1800s, the first one to notice human-induced climate change. And that was from cutting down the forest and draining the rivers for crops to make cash for the rich men over in Europe. And so it just really, I think, comes down to how we think of nature, and if it's something to conquer, and then how we imply what's needed there on other people to meet those needs. And the trauma that has been passed down for generations that we see, again, here specifically in the US, but all around the world, because of the slave system. It holds back so many people from being able to reach their potential, because there is this deep trauma that goes back generations that still people are feeling today. And especially if you look at the brutality of so many original peoples on pretty much any land that you would go to around the world, that trauma is so ingrained. And then the trauma of just present day life, and like what you went through, TB, as a youth and living in the war zone, and that's happening so much everywhere. I've done trainings with the Center for Mind Body Medicine, which is a very interesting website. It's just cmbm.org. And that's giving us somatic practices to deal with the trauma that is either generational or that we've experienced in our own life. And they do this work, after hurricanes, after mass shootings, in refugee camps. We were doing it here after the devastating fires that wiped out entire communities. And so it's just, I see humans as such sensitive beings. And so the more resilient that we can be in our own self to deal with our own trauma we experience in this life, as well as all the generational trauma that's passed down. And it doesn't really matter the color of your skin. There's still so much trauma around that even if it's not in your direct lineage, there's still, this societal trauma that we're all dealing with. And COVID really upped the ante on that a lot. And I think as people were more secluded this last year and didn't have the wellness that comes from interpersonal communication, the mental health crisis has just been exacerbated so much because of COVID. And so I think we're going to have kind of a whole new wave of trauma that people are dealing with. And so to amplify the tools that can help them today in our present time, I think also radiates back throughout, if it's generational, if it's past lives, if it's just now, if it comes from our dreams, if it comes from plant medicine. We can tap into all of these realms and then find ways to try to heal it ourselves. And that will radiate out, I think, to heal the planet. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, but so there are healing processes that let's suppose, I don't know, are they? I suppose there are all kinds of healing processes, right? So some of them are more generative, and some of them are not so generative. Some of them might also be destructive. So when we say healing within as an emergent wealth generator, I suppose we're saying some healing within will lead to that, right? I mean, I can have a healing within with a bottle of scotch. To forget. I don't know if it's a healing or doing more damage, but it's definitely a way to cope with it. Or I can go outside and smash windows, okay? Because I rebel against a society that doesn't align with my values. That's coping with it. It's probably not healing, but it's coping, right? I have a sense that there's this distinction that needs to be made between coping with something and healing, and healing in not in any way, but in a way that is generative of wealth, which would be like a constructive, right, healing process. So it's I can definitely resonate with what you're saying. There's a lot of trauma, and trauma is also a way of structuring society today and controlling society today. We govern by fear, right? So, oh my God, there was a terrorist attack. Let's bomb the hell out of Middle East, right? It seems like trauma is a tool also. Obviously, trauma is everywhere, right? But how can we identify healing mechanisms? Can we turn the COVID experience into a healing that starts with the individual, that is constructive and puts us in a different position? So we kind of sort of take advantage of this crisis and move society somewhere better. You see what I'm saying? Or like, are we in charge of this healing? Are we in charge of this healing if we just take COVID? Are we in charge of this healing process, starting from the individual? Black Lives Matter. Are these people really in charge of their own coping mechanisms and healing process? Or there is a sort of a wave that goes through them and they go with the wave? You see what I'm saying? I don't know. It's just a conversation, right? Nothing has been structured before. So the value of this interaction here is just to explore.
So I have something to add there. One thing is about viruses. Just trying to land into the COVID. So viruses, they are usually seen as negative, but we are populated of viruses. So there are also positive viruses. And I think we have this opportunity of taking one way or the other. So as you are saying, coping with something or healing something, it seems like a conscious decision of going and be a negative virus for your habitat or being a positive virus for your habitat. Of course, I feel that we are part of a superorganism and a species and a very complex world where I don't have the impression that my acts, they are really reflecting any change. But at the same time, when you are taking action in a positive way, you feel better. And feeling better, it's something that lasts, not just crashing a window and then feeling guilty because you did it, or not feeling at all guilty, but not also understanding that you didn't do anything that adds value. So I agree, and that might be a relief, and hitting someone or being in a fight, that might be a relief, and this is part of the primitive consciousness that we have, and I think this is why also we need to understand the femininity as an equal, because there are some societies, for example, that for going to war, they ask the women if it's really needed or not, because they are the ones that knows if what is to lose a husband or a son, and they have give birth. So it seems that as a man, we are not completely understanding what is to give birth and what is to bring life to the planet, and we are not hardwired to do that, and this is the way that we are. But let's say even in pharaonic institutions, as you are talking about institutional wealth, it was about the couple, and they were sharing as a different kind of unit. So I think it goes into what kind of environment you want to see. So for example, war creates conditions conducive to violence, conducive to death. And we know that, and we can always take advantage of that kind of situation as a productive system, as a money system. But what if we do the other way around? And this is the part that I like from biomimicry, that is about creating conditions conducive to life. So it is, for me, a conscious decision that I need to take. Of course, the whole system is working on a different, it seems to me that it's working in a different direction. But after 10 years of doing these kind of things, and I'm pretty sure that you've been doing this for many years, and Hannah as well, we finally met in a point where we can share our work and we can share the things that we have done differently over our living years. And that for me, it's a great incentive to keep going into this direction, because I'm getting to understand that I'm not just on my own, that these traumas are not just mine, but actually I share it with someone else. So when I think about this Paul Hawken idea on getting connected through the internet as connecting the immune system in the planet, then that makes me think also as what kind of virus we want to be as humanity, and how as a species we can rather add value or not. And if we are part of nature, then what is the ecological niche that we would like to fulfill? And I don't know if that was the same for the birds, I wasn't there, or for the bees, like choosing a flower or a plant to co-evolve over the next million years. But it seems that we are so young, and we have the opportunity to be conscious about this decision, that it might be very relevant to heal from within yourself, because this is not a decision that can be taken for the rest of the world and not for me. What actually changes the game is that you take it on your own and your intention is different, and then it's really hard to keep going, because it seems that you are a counterflow until you find other people, and then it becomes like critical connections and all these kind of things. But in ecosystems, it's more like competition, and killing each other is energy expensive. So you don't want to spend and to waste your energy, your vital energy, like this. If we are out of the world as a species, if we become extinct, then we are out of the game of evolution. So it seems that as a species we need to survive somehow. So if this is what we need to do or not, but that's what I like to think in my survival instinct, that it's about surviving, then how can we create these conditions conducive to life in the future? Because otherwise, well, it's always easier to kill each other, of course.
Yeah. And I see a real difference between relief and healing and resilience. And so, sure, if I'm depressed about the state of the world, I could go drink some bourbon and feel better for a little while. I could get really pissed and go smash some windows and have that temporary relief. But next time those feelings come up again and I'm triggered in that way, I'm just going to go drink more or smash more windows. And it's not moving me to a point where I'm not going to want to do that again. It just keeps us in that cycle. And people get so dependent on those things of just drowning their sorrows rather than dealing with them. And so to me, healing is about really then taking a step back. And so what is triggering you to want to smash those windows, and what's causing that, and how can we get to the root of the problem more? And then healing, though, is a long and kind of nebulous and constant thing. And, we can heal a broken bone, but the emotional stuff is usually kind of always with us. And so it's always a process. And growing up, I had so many health issues, and I think so many of them were related to both my exposure to heavy metals from the oil processing facility, because my school was still there as they were doing this construction that exposed us, but then also the constant stress of not knowing if I would wake up in the morning, if there had been a slight earthquake and a gas leak. It just really weighed on me. And so I grew up with the archetype of the wounded healer. And I was a better healer for others because of the trauma and the illnesses that I was carrying, that I could relate to people more and really understand. And so then therefore be able to offer healing in different ways that I think if I was a perfect vision of health, I wouldn't have been able to relate to them in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
But then tying into resilience is like, to me, that's kind of almost the thing we need the most right now, as we're seeing ecosystems collapse, as we're seeing these fires and floods and droughts and everything that is out of people's control, that suddenly their life just vanishes. And unless you have a strong foundation yourself, when societal trauma happens, you just can't deal with it and you're not resilient. And so for me, just even in my daily life, I'm always tapping into, okay, how resilient do I feel at this moment? Can I deal with this? If there's some kind of heavy thing that comes to me, or I turn on the news and see something just horrible, is that going to trigger me that I just have to turn to the bottle? Or do I have that inner strength to be strong enough in myself to then also be strong enough to offer others help? So that if there is a hurricane or some kind of disaster that strikes, are you going to be the one sitting on the street crying and not coping? Or are you going to be the one who's strong enough to then go help others and move through to the solution? And that's the point that we really need to be at, just for the uncertainty that's coming down the line. And so that's why I think, there's the saying, like, make hay while the sun shines. While life is good, I think it's so important to be building up our bank of well-being, our wealth of health in ourselves, so that when trauma strikes, we're not depleted and just freak out. We can be a better service to ourselves and others, and then also not hold on to the trauma. I'd lost my house in a fire 11 years ago, and I watched the trees and the forest and everything come back while I was still dealing with my own personal trauma and hurt and stuff emotionally. And so it's like, okay, how do we be strong enough to be able to face what could be coming down our way? And if we're strong enough now and working towards these solutions, then hopefully the traumas of the future won't be as bad. And to me, that's kind of tying into this wellness as wealth. If there's a wealth and an overabundance of well-being, there won't be wars. There won't be all of this devastation that we inflict on each other. So
yeah. Don't we feel like sometimes that the trauma is sort of we borrow the trauma, we borrow it from social trends, but it's not really ours. Mm-hmm. Don't we feel that? And then we're presented with a pill. We're presented with a healing process, which is like putting us into a movement to fulfill some agendas. I just want to put that out because sometimes the trauma is not ours and the healing is not ours. it's you know what I'm saying? We're kind of led to that. You know, we're taught about some trauma in school, but we haven't, like all these indigenous things what we hear today, and it's very controversial, but I think sometimes it's good to talk about it. You know, you hear that, well, something happens back in the day and it's good. I can adjust my course of life to be more respectful and more constructive on these relationships with indigenous people. But that trauma that I could feel, I wasn't there. Yeah. I wasn't there, right? So it was put in me by stories, by education, or by society,
or by guilt. You know.
Yes, it's sort of a guilt. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's also something, because when we say healing within, you know, there's a lot to unpack. The healing within as an emergent wealth creator. Am I healing from something that from a wound that I have because I experienced something on my skin, or from something that was given to me, transferred to me, you know, and now all of a sudden I need to go through a healing process that is prescribed, or is something that, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think
that healing real, or is it constructed, you know?
I think that your point earlier about borrowing trauma, it really makes me think of the Black Lives Movement that we experienced, especially last year here in the United States and around the world. And then that, coupled by COVID, you know, just made everything worse. But it could have certainly been much more constructive if there had been more healing opportunities at a societal level. Instead, it just divided us more and brought on a lot of like white shaming and white guilt and all of this, that it's like, I can't help the color of my skin. I can only help what I do with this life and my skin. And, you know, it could have been such the opportunity for America and the rest of the world to take a real look at our history, to take a real look at what we're doing now and how we're still oppressing people of color. And how could we then work together to move beyond that? But instead, especially with the political people that were in charge at the time, they just used it to cause more conflict and more of that kind of social illness and divisiveness, rather than an opportunity of healing. But there were a lot of groups and workshops and book clubs and all kinds of stuff specifically for white people to deal with, okay, here's how you can learn about your history and try to be more of a support mechanism for people of color, and to help create more equality rather than more of this just illness and kind of a cancer in our society that racism is. And so I don't know. Yeah, lot of borrowed trauma and missed opportunity for healing. And I really hope that, as we are hopefully emerging from COVID, that everything can be seen as an opportunity for healing and a new way of doing things. And maybe we can, as a society, heal together better.
Yeah, it seems to me that healing, that process, it's something that we need to be conscious about, turning into a generator, to make it generative, right? And well constructive, let's say. It's not just it's not going to happen by itself. It's not like, I don't think that a healing process necessarily leads to generation of new wealth or new potential.
I think a part of it is just one quick point, and then we'll turn it back to Hugo. I think a big part of it, though, especially at these societal levels that we're talking about, and things that are more kind of emotional than a physical broken leg, that we really have to have a vision of what we want and what would a better future look like. And if in 10 years, if there was more equality in the world, how would we be interacting? And I think that, I hear this, we have a crisis of imagination, because we don't even bother to imagine what a healed planet would look like, or something, or just even in our daily lives, in our society. And so I really invite people to think of, what would that future look like that you want to live in, and then how do you take those steps to get there? And even just, if you're dealing with a broken leg, just imagining yourself running again and having it be healed is a big part of that process of telling our mind where we want to get to.
Yeah, and sometimes just being aware and having these kind of discussions in between different cultures, I feel that we are representing different energies that comes from the world, and I feel it a lot like constellations very often. So I really appreciate that you are taking the time and opening your space and your heart. I would like just to go a little bit through this from my own feeling. And it feels like we have these chronic issues, and most of the money and the capitalism comes from war money. And the whole system is actually pricing the most violent, because capitalism is supporting conquerors and diminishing the locals that were conquered. But this is a trauma that happens over time, and that is subconscious, and that we borrow it, and that is bringing violence, bad habits, disturbance, slavery, and we are as far as stress relief oriented, because we keep trapped into this idea, and just talking about presidents that gets us into violence, or want to divide the perspective. It is more about stressing the stress so you can feel relief with an election, with a war, with a fight. So if we try to create healing environments and then working from the collective heart, so in our case, as I was saying, we come from this collective heart, and building resilience, understanding wealth from many different perspectives. So as well-being, but also as within health, as new economic models, as you were saying. And that brings me to this idea of imagination. So what is the purpose within ourselves that we want to see in a personal and a planetary level? So I like this idea of personal healer. So we need to heal ourselves, and the planetary well-being. So what we are trying to see as wealth is also related to the bigger purpose where we are, or the bigger scope that we can reach from our simple minds. So building something regenerative, institutional, and focusing on new economic models could actually infuse the energy through creativity, production, and collaboration, as you were saying, Tibi. But it has to be centered somehow in nature, because this is our context. So how, by enhancing this nature from the perspective of wealth, we can create more life. And from Hannah's idea also of this Abundant Earth Foundation, I think it's related to life abundance. So if we can imagine that we can create a system that brings, through economic models, more life to the planet, and that we are in a certain harmony with it, so we don't borrow these traumas that has been left to us, but we decide on the present to move forward and to try to bring a difference. I think imagination and our internal energy is bigger than we believe. It's gonna create healthier connections. It's gonna depollute this collective memory. So, well, this is my take on this, and just from the conversation that we had together. And the last thing is about COVID again, because I felt that I got the COVID, which is not something that I provoked, but I got it. And I was very ill, and the thing that I got into my own self was the word gratitude. I think if we can feel the gratitude even for this trip that I needed to go through to better understand some other things, gratitude to the virus to get into my body and to be welcome, so we can kind of survive rather than fight with each other. I think that brings a whole different context. And of course, I'm not exempt of many bad things. But when the trip is my own, then I decide what perspective I want to bring. And this is when imagination becomes, or dreaming becomes really, really important.
Wow, that was a nice summary, and the visuals are amazing. So here's a few individuals, just common people struggling with this question of healing within as the emergent well generator. From our own little life, I'm sure there is tons of books, tons of literature written on these subjects, and there's probably a wealth of information out there. I guess we're just starting I hope we stimulate people into digging more into these things, and getting more educated about it, and go see what other people have said, people that have thought about these things more than us right here. But it's nice to have that conceptual map, so to see what came out of this interaction. And then I hope this is just a start for further exploration, right? For people that are listening to this video, and even for ourselves. I mean, it's nice to open my mind to this topic. So maybe in conclusion, do we have any questions? Hannah, you have any question to ask?
I think that there is, just before you go to your question, Hannah, because I think there is a part of this OOcast that is ask a question that you don't have the opportunity to ask in general, or that you have never asked. So that could be like the closing. So something that you would like to know that you haven't asked before to TV or to me.
Well, Hugo, I would point this at you with your expertise in biomimicry. What does nature do, to heal and to spread this wealth and move it out? And I just always try to look to nature for the answers. And so that would just, I have my thoughts, but curious if you want to unpack that at all in a minute or two. But
yeah, well, I'm also wondering, so there is no answer, like a straight answer for that one, but what I've been learning is that death is part of the cycle. So we need to also accept death as within the same cycle, so you can be part of the up cycle as well. So I think oftentimes we don't see that there are cycles, and oftentimes we want to deny death in general. But if we see the full picture, then we need to include death into the equation, and I think that is also a relief, because nothing has to last forever, whether we believe it's good or bad. it's always opportunity to get into one or other cycle. It depends on your perspective.
So next time I see a wildfire, I'm just going to be more patient and observe how nature deals with that event and regenerate after that.
In Montana, in the mountain forest, what I learned is that there are some pine seeds that they just get germinated with fire.
Yeah.
So indeed, the
tree, I think, is like that too.
The fire is part of the bigger cycle, and we don't like to see this because we are very linear. So of course I don't like nature to be burned, but when I learn about this, I say, wow, well, it is true that we should maybe just be part of all or many cycles and reinforce them.
We've removed ourselves so much from nature's cycles, and so it's kind of this dance of trying to come back into them, because and the fires is a great example. You know, if it's done on a regular basis, it keeps things under control so that then the fires come through and do that natural process. But when we've suppressed them for hundreds of years and so much has built up, that then they come through and they burn hotter than they're supposed to, and so then those trees that would have been germinated, everything dies and it kills the soil. It's part of this healing that we need to do with our connection to nature, to get back into the cycles, to be able to do this dance. And then we'll find wealth everywhere. If we just live more in harmony with nature, capitalism and money won't be an issue, because there is an abundant earth. We just need to tap into that. So thank you. This has been fun, gentlemen. I enjoyed our exploration here today.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Sometimes it's not easy to talk about healing processes and past trauma. Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity to know you better, but also to delve into this topic. Thank you, Hugo, for your wonderful graphical presentations. That will be available online, right? So when we publish this video, we're going to put a link to it so that we can explore this conceptual map. Very good. And hope this is a starter for other reflections for other people.